My Ani. My heart is in Ani. My name is Ani. Ani is mine. I am Ani, and Ani is mine. I proudly bear the name of one of Armenia's capital cities, and it is the most beautiful name. During the time of the kingdom of the Bagratounis, that famous Armenian feudal family, it became the capital city of the Armenians, giving color to and embellishing the Bagratouni kingdom. The name gave unlimited trust and glory, all of which found a place on this small plateau of about 150 hectares. This is Ani. Ani passed the crossroads of history, and from this formerly blossoming city, these piles of rocks are what remains. At the time when Ani shone, with its entire beauty and splendor, the whole world seemed in comparison a ruin. But now, when the world is prosperous, my Ani has turned into ruins. As a city, it is noted in history as more recent than other Armenian cities from the Middle Ages. And even though it had a short history, it played an important part in Armenian history. And until today, its fame as a powerful political, industrial, and cultural center is maintained. Ani is mentioned in history as an impregnable fortress for the first time by the famous Armenian historians Yerishe and Ghazar Parpetsi. In the 5th century, Ani was just as impregnable as the Armenian fortresses Artagers and Garni. It was located in the province of Shirak, in the Armenian world of Ararat. The city was spread out over a triangular plateau, surrounded on 3 sides by the Harutyunyan River and its right tributary called Zakhotzadzor or Ani River. With all its veins, the plateau joins with the Shirak Plains and is its natural continuation. The Harutyunyan and its tributaries, now as in the past, give love to Ani and the plains of Shirak with talent and creative strength, endowed the sons of Ani and one of Armenia's highest peaks, Aragats, and the historical mountain Arjuarij, with their majesty, were protectors of the city. Legends are many about the origin of the name Ani, and which of those are trustworthy is hard to say. One legend exists according to which on the southwest side, where the Harutyunyan and its right tributary, the Alajan, mix with each other on the top of an inaccessible mountain called Archkabert, Damsel's Castle, that during pagan times there was a temple of the goddess Anahit, which was later converted into a church. Later, with that temple's name, a settlement called Ani was built there. The first scientific attempt at explaining the origin of the name was by Nicolaus Adons, based on the important testimony of Strabo. According to this testimony, among the people who lived in Aturpatekan were people called Aenia or Aenia, part of which left their ancient homeland and emigrated to Armenia, establishing themselves in Ani. According to another point of view, Ani received its name from the fortress of Ani. Ani received its name from the fortress city of Ani, located in the province of Daranagh in Greater Armenia. This Ani was the religious center for pagan Armenians. The historian Vartan of Barterbert wrote, "The city of Ani, which is called Care. It isn't clear why it is called Care and what that word means here, as it doesn't have the meaning of the word care. My Ani is one of those rare place names of old Armenia that has almost never been distorted in foreign sources. Greek authors have called it Anian, the Arabs Ana, and all others call it just that, Ani. The settlement of Ani existed in the most ancient times, but trustworthy information about its founding has not been preserved. It is obvious that as a fortified settlement, Ani had its beginning several millennium before our time. Its history reaches back to the time when all the races and tribes living in the Armenian highlands hadn't yet been consolidated into what formed the Armenian people. Near the ruins of the city, about a kilometer away, is a vast cemetery, which proves that the history of Ani dates from the earliest times. During archaeological excavations here, ruins of Cyclopean fortresses were discovered. One of the well-known facts about the history of this era is that Ani was a mausoleum built in the 7th to 8th centuries before Christ. The beautiful capital city of the Bagratounis is currently found in the eastern part of the Turkish Republic. In the beginning of the 20th century, along with the province of Kars, Ani was in Russian territory, but later they both ended up in Turkey. Turkey and Russia decided the fate of Ani and Kars without the participation of Armenians. Until recently, Ani was located in a military zone, and to reach it, one had to obtain permission from the military authorities in Kars and the Kars Museum. But now, the Turkish Republic, which considers itself the owner and heir of Ani, declared it a tourism zone, passing it to the management of the tourism ministry. These are tickets to enter Ani, and this is the modest booth where one can obtain the tickets. Anyone who wants to get to know Ani, which in the Middle Ages was the example of perfection as an advanced capital city with its high culture and taste, can pay 5 lira and have his ticket to enter the city. Just 5 lira or $3. In the course of a year, only a few tourists will come, and that's it. Such is the current sad state of Ani. Isn't that little for a city that was a decoration for the world and which had been the home of glory and trust? If people have to pay to enter Ani, what about these animals? What is this? Do they also buy tickets to enter Ani? In this place, satiated with its rich cultural heritage, cows are grazing. In the democratic and tolerant Turkish Republic, Ani is a museum pasture. In this state, they don't discriminate between people and animals. It's good that at least we didn't see cows in the Kars Museum. Evidently, they have many obligations in Ani and weren't hurrying to leave the place. Even after the destruction of Ani, it didn't lose its charm and meaning for Armenians and for foreigners. Today, too, the fate and soul of Ani together calls you and me, so we can see Ani and live, to see Ani and believe, to see Ani and know what glory is, to see Ani and for the 1000th time become proud that our name is Ani. We see it, so we can live. Everyone who comes to Ani is greeted by the sky with its sunset. The sky has a secret. It was a witness to its glory, was a witness to its good and bad days, and is the only one who didn't abandon Ani. It saw Ani's birth, blossoming, and destruction, and kept every second of its history in its mind. The glory of Ani is reflected in the sky every day, and the prayer of Ani colors the sky with every sunrise. Each day the sky corrects the false history told by an uninformed guide. The sky of Ani will greet you, so it can tell you everything and take you to Ani. Before reaching the walls of Ani, pneumatic wind and signs with Turkish letters will always try to frustrate you, so they can persuade you that they are the owners and rulers of the city, and that the ornament of the Middle Ages is theirs. Which is spread like a massive net of the city, and later will reach the people of the city, where half months. To establish its rule, it looks for helpers and searches for clues. It will whisper that he is the city's only inhabitant, flies over his occupied territory, and will be called in the city states. And so they should on the outskirts of the ruins of Ani. Today, this is all he is able to create and feel himself the owner of. This is the limit of what he pictures in city building. But the fate, glory, magnificence and love which were the foundations of the capital city of Ani were Armenian in all their layers. Don't listen to the false and insincere history of the wind. Don't read the distorted facts on the signs. I know the history of Ani, one of the most beautiful capitals of Armenia, much better than the wind, which whispers in Turkish. The history of my Ani was injected in my blood with mother's milk. I will shout louder than the wind, so that his foreign-sounding and false words are no longer heard. Let the whole world hear that Ani is the city of the Armenian soul, that Ani is the city of the Armenian fate, that Ani is the city of Armenian talent, that Ani is mine. When Ani appears, you will forget everything, and you will understand that glory and fate lived here, and that the people of Ani were born to build, prosper, and believe. The defensive walls of Ani are the most vivid witness to that glory. Only the city that earned the honor of being called the ornament of the Middle Ages could have this kind of walls, and thanks to its magnificence and beauty, enjoyed the unhidden love of the aggressors of the world. The outer walls, or walls of Sambat, in spite of the effects of many destructive earthquakes and time, have maintained their influential and powerful appearance. These walls were built by one of the Bagratouni kings Sambat, who was called emperor by his contemporaries. Ani was the universe and he was its master. Ani's quickly advancing power and glory led to the need of new walls, more expansive than those constructed by another Bagratouni king, Ashot the Merciful, as the original walls were already simply put too small for this city, which had chosen the path of amazing the world. For just this reason, Sambat the emperor undertook the construction of new walls. He constructed these walls not only to protect his beautiful city, but to embellish his city with yet another magnificent edifice, so that whoever sees it from afar would never doubt for even a second that a diamond was hidden behind the walls. In the course of 8 years, Sambat the emperor constructed the outside walls, or walls of Sambat. Parallel to the walls, on the outer side, a defensive moat was built, which was filled with water. The walls constructed by Sambat had a length of 2,500 meters and surrounded the city on all sides. And in those sections where it was more accessible to seize the city, the walls consisted of 2 layers. The walls of Sambat had the height of 3-story buildings of today. All the towers except those of Zakhotzadzor and Gailadzor are round. Part of the inside of the towers are 2 to 3 stories and were foreseen for centuries. In certain pyramids there were also chapels, as there were in the walls of Ashot. In those times, a sculpture of Sambat II was one of the walls, a model of the city was in his hands. The rulers of Ani who followed also weren't indifferent concerning the defensive walls of the city. The walls built by Sambat were renovated in the days of the Zakharyans and Kurdish Shadadyans, as well as by certain individuals. Rich people, even inhabitants, without noble backgrounds, desire to immortalize themselves and remain in the memories of their descendants, even if by renovating just one tower of the powerful walls. Until today, there are inscriptions preserved on a few of the towers mentioning those who did the renovations. There are 23 inscriptions on the defensive walls of Ani, 11 of which were done during the time of the Zakharyans. If until now you doubt whose city this was and who ruled and lived in Ani, look at the many crosses on the walls. 1 cross, 1 stone, 1 cross, 1 stone. As many churches as there are in Ani, there are that many crosses on the city walls. The walls of Ani weren't only defensive structures. They decorated the city and were decorated from the outside. Sambat built the walls, but the other Armenian rulers, the Zakharyan princely family, decorated and embellished them. Over the main entrance there are reliefs of panthers or lions, these being the emblems of the 13th century Ani. These greet today's visitors to Ani. Many decorated reliefs of lions, bulls, dragons with open jaws and eagles, and many traces of attacking arrows are preserved until today. The tower with the Greek cross is still standing. The tower gate of Kars, the one with the swastika. The people of Ani were loyal to nature and to God, but most of all they believed in their strength and in the glory of Ani. Believing in God, they worshipped Ani. From the 4th to the 8th centuries, the lords of Shirak and Arsharunik of the Armenian family of Khachatryan ruled Ani. Built in inaccessible territory, Ani was an impregnable fortress and was where the treasures of the Khachatryan family were kept. This is Akhchkabert, which was the first residence of the Khachatrakyans in Ani, and Mijnabert, which became the princely. Now the road that connected the citadel had steps and was covered with connecting arches is collapsed. The king's daughter, who lived in Akhchkabert, went to the city and returned by this road every day. In the 7th century, the Khachatrakyans reached the peak of their power, and Ani became an impregnable and beautifully constructed fortress. The first owners of Ani were builders, and it was they who laid the foundation for the civilization and development of Ani, which would flourish in the days of the Bagratounis and Zakharyans. In the citadel, the Khachatrakyans constructed a palace-like church and encircled the citadel with defensive walls. During the time of Khachatryan rule, a reservoir for the royal palace was built in the citadel. Today, not even a trace of all this remains in the ruins of Ani. It's as if the Khachatrakyans and their ruling years didn't exist. After the Khachatrakyans, the Bagratounis ruled Ani. This royal Armenian family expanded its territories in different ways, with their power, by coming to agreements with the caliphates, and by purchases. In the 9th century, Ashot Bagratouni, the meat-eater, named so by the people for not maintaining the Lenten fast, bought the provinces of Arsharunik and Shirak from the Khachatrakyans and, along with the fortress of Ani, united these provinces with his lands. By the end of the century, Ani was already a town. The Bagratounis didn't immediately turn Ani into their city where the king reigns. In the beginning, they established themselves in Bagaran, then moved their royal residence to Shirakavan. Even Kars, which was a strong fortified city and had been the capital city of the Bagratounis, couldn't compare with Ani. Ani had all the ingredients to be called a capital city. Ashot the Merciful's predecessors understood the need of turning Ani into the capital city. But only he had the luck of declaring it a capital city. Other circumstances contributed to Ani becoming a capital city. In the vicinity of the city, one after the other was arising as a cultural center, such as Tekor and Horamos, and besides that, Ani, along with the nearby fortresses of Maghazbert and Tignis, formed a wonderful fortification knot. Understanding this very well, Ashot the Merciful, when his father Abbas was still alive, began forming construction plans in Ani. Beside that, Ani had a natural, quite inaccessible position. On 3 sides, Ani was surrounded with canyons and gorges, which in the turbulent times of the Middle Ages, subject to attacks by nomadic Turkish tribes, gave additional opportunity of being more secure, inaccessible, and impregnable. The bearer of the nickname Merciful, Ashot III was kind, tolerant, and peace-loving. The people called Ashot III merciful for just that, his humanitarianism. He looked equally at the rich and poor, and unlike other rich people, he didn't avoid the lower class. For great festive occasions, he prepared special tables for poor, crippled, and sick people. Ani was declared as the capital city during the days of this Ashot the Merciful. In 1961, he moved the royal palace from Kars to Ani, declared it the capital city, and was ordained King of Armenia, King of Kings. Ani was a capital city that had to be strong like its owners, a royal city fitting its royal owners. From this time, Ani entered a new era of political and cultural life. Turning into a capital city wasn't an end in itself. It was to become the foundation for the creation of a united country. The defensive walls built by the Khachatrayan were basically preserved, and on the foundation of those, Ashot constructed the inner walls, which later would receive his name. Historians testified that there were churches and chapels inside the walls' towers. These are the remnants of the walls built in Ashot's time. The strength, power, faith, and love that Ashot invested in these walls were destroyed. In his days, or in the days of the Khachatrayan, the first aqueduct was passed through the city, and parts of the royal palace were constructed. Drinking water was brought to the city from the environs from a distance of more than 10 kilometers. Clay as well as iron pipes were used for the aqueduct and its branches. Providing the city with water also had strategic meaning. Water was needed both in times of peace and in times of siege and war. The system ensured water for all districts of the city. As the city spread out, more districts were included in the system, so that new inhabited areas would also be ensured with provisions of drinking water. One after the other of the Bagratouni kings loved Ani equally and wanted to pass on their desire to see the city endowed with powerful royal grandeur to the sons of their sons. Every day Ani gave them the opportunity to feel their power and enjoy their rule, and they gave glory and love to Ani. They were putting stone onto stone to use their enthusiasm to become the foundation to build a prosper, mixing their love and dedication as sand with cement, and putting their faith on the dome. This is how they built the city to amaze the world and give life to the Armenians. The city progressed at an unusual pace for the Middle Ages. Located on the great international trade route of that time, the section from Trabzon to Dvin, Ani began to grow quickly. Artisans and traders from Dvin and other places came to Ani in great numbers and settled there permanently. Ani captivated all those who knew how to build and who had faith, who were born to be an inhabitant of the splendid city. Ani had 40 doors, 3 of which were main doors. They were called Kruts, Dvno, and Avak. They were fortified with iron nails and were impossible to destroy. The inner and outer doors of the walls of Sambat didn't face each other, but were arranged irregularly. This arranging was done for military defensive purposes. Thanks to this arrangement, during the defense of the city, it was easier to deal a final blow to the attacking enemy inside the narrow passageways inside the wall. It is mentioned in many sources that Ani had 10 or 8 doors. Now the traces of 5 doors are noticeable in the walls of Sambat. 2 are in the outer row and 5 in the inner. Every day, men of genius, with the unlimited imagination and skill, would come and go to Ani through the 40 doors to turn the skill into colorful carpets, silver and gold ornaments, and choice earthenware, and to give fame and renown to Ani and its artisans. The exceptional skills of city building and governing were specific characteristics that the Bagratounis were naturally endowed with. It was thanks to these kings that Ani was different from other Middle Age cities in its distinct architectural constructions and orderly way of life. Ani and other large cities of the Armenian of the Bagratounis were built with layouts like large cities in Persia and Central Asian cities. They were divided into three parts: the citadel, the Shahastan or main city, and the suburbs. These sections appeared during different times in Ani. In the beginning, the fortress was founded, which later became the citadel, and the city itself was formed along with the suburbs. Ani's citadel wasn't found in the center of the city, but on the southwestern end. It was in existence since the times of the Khachatrayan. The old city was located between the walls of Ashot and the citadel, and with the construction of the walls of Sambat, the new city was demarcated. The building of the city's infrastructure wasn't done arbitrarily, but under careful supervision. The Mother Cathedral, the Church of Gagik, the Paran Palace, and other monuments which decorated the city were placed in such locations that would embellish the city's general appearance. From a city building point of view, the proper placement of the buildings was specific especially to the new city. Ani was built densely and free space didn't exist. Courtyards were small. From the construction of living quarters, it was evident that it was done by classes. There were many private houses that were lavishly made up, as well as common and modest living quarters. The floors of poor people's houses were plastered with regular mud, while homes of the rich had stone slab floors. The homes consisted of these parts: the tonir, storage halls, fireplace stoves, and grain barns. Homes were usually 1.5 or 2 stories. Auxiliary rooms were usually found in the first floor or the cellar, while the upper stories were living rooms. In the home complexes of the rich, there were also small churches or chapels. Since the territory of Ani was small, they used the space carefully. Homes in residential areas had common walls and weren't arranged longitudinally along the street, but towards the back. It is difficult to picture these as the homes of Ani in the era of its blossoming. These storage halls, tonniers, and probably other conditions created for domestic purposes only witness that here the people of Ani lived, loved, cried, and rejoiced. Ani was a city organized by classes. The rich of the city lived in the citadel and in comfortable districts, with the lower classes in dull quarters, outskirts, and in modest huts and caves. The number of palaces in Ani reached 5. Of those, the first was the royal palace of the Bagratounis, which was found in the citadel, and the other 4 were princely palaces which were conditionally called palaces of Paran, Sarkis, Abdulgharib, and Vartapet, the names of their owners. These were all found outside the citadel in the city itself. The citadel was the royal residence of the Bagratounis. This was the center and heart of the city. The armory, treasury, granary, homes for palace officials, fortress soldiers, clergymen, the palace church, the royal library, and cemetery for kings were here. During different times, 7 churches were built here. The royal palace was in the upper part of the citadel, which bear the traces of architectural activity from around 4 centuries. The palace was divided into 2 wings, the southern and the northern. The Basilica Church of the Khachatrayan was in the southern wing, and in the northern wing, the ceremonial hall and bathhouse. The owners of the palace also made sure that the Church of Gagik, Tsarkotsazor, the Arjoarij Mountains, the Mother Cathedral, the Ahuryan Gorge, and Aragat all appeared from their halls and rooms. This is what remains of the palace of Ani. Enemies burned and destroyed the foundation. After that, friend and foe plundered it. The royal palace was becoming of kings. Hoodlums and gangs aren't guilty that they weren't born kings and don't know how to appreciate the royal and the noble. They were from the tribe of the whispering wind around us, who were the lords of ruin and destruction. The grandeur of the gold-covered palace of the Bagratounis was meaningless for them, and the royal palace something superfluous. The Seljuk and Turkish gangs were satisfied with their foul-smelling dirt roofs. What were they going to do in the royal palace of the Bagratounis? The imperial purple and fragrances didn't help. One and the same, they weren't born to be kings. The Bagratounis turned the peak of the citadel into a park and decorated it with a flower garden, just as the Artsunis of Vaspurakan had done with the Akhtamar island. The flower bed on the hill blossomed and was fragrant, since Ani was still blossoming and blooming. And this pile of rocks was once a bathhouse. Witness to this are these rows of pipes. In Armenia, these bathhouses have an ancient history. They don't have the same meaning as bathhouses today. In the Middle Ages, when going to the bathhouse, one usually met his acquaintances, chatted with them, and played backgammon or chess. In the bathhouses, even business deals were sealed. In the Ani of the Middle Ages, there were 7 bathhouses. One of these was the royal bathhouse with its 7 rooms and their hot and cold water pools and the system to provide water, heat it, and remove it. Hot water passed through iron pipes and cold water through clay pipes. The walls and floors were heated using special fire heaters. Everything was carefully thought out. The hot steam room was unique with its fragrances and special curative teas. That leads to Ani today, rocky, dusty, and unfitting for Ani's glory. At one time, the important roads of Ani began at the main gate of the walls of Sambat, stretching to the south. To control entering and leaving the city, as well as keeping the streets clean, carts and carriages with heavy loads entered through special doors. Ani's main road past the city's aqueduct, and stone seats for resting were placed along the length of the road. The roads received their names according to the names of trade or craft brotherhoods. The street of weavers was called Baznots, saddle makers lived and worked on Saraj Street, welders lived on Darbnot Street, horseshoers owned the Nalbandnots, and the shoemakers' district was called Koshkakarots. If you no longer have the strength to look at the ruins of Ani, for a moment look up. The sky of Ani will dedicate its limitless colors to you, so you can for a moment forget the city's current ruined state and believe in its standing and renovated future. Besides the citadel, Shahastan, and the suburbs, Ani had underground and cave or cavernous sections. One of the reasons for creating the cave section was the high value of the city's territory. Everyone wanted to become a resident of the splendid Ani, but there wasn't that much space in Ani. For just that reason, the civilized people of Ani remembered how prehistoric people lived. Cave or cavernous Ani was a separate district where there were living quarters, churches, oil presses, mills, and cemeteries. This was an entire city-town which still had existence in the time of the Bagratounis. They adapted the caves with the new conditions and used them as living quarters, hiding places along the closed ravines. Cavernous Ani was a real city which was created over a long period of time. In the beginning, the stone homes were few and belonged to the poor, but after that, the number of these homes increased. Of the new structures, there were rock homes that were made up of several rooms and which had everything for comfort. The recesses in the walls served various economic purposes. If the poor people of the city lived permanently in these stone homes, the rich lived above ground, descending here from their homes only during times of danger. Also, not small in number were the churches in Ani that were carved into rock. Cavernous Ani had around 30 churches which were so small it would be more correct to call them prayer chapels. Of the unique structures of cavernous Ani were the dove coves. There were dove coves in almost all the districts of cavernous Ani. Preparation of these straight-cornered scoops demanded great expertise. Dove are living in these nests until today. Their construction in old times is explained by agricultural necessities. Bird waste collected here, which would be used to fertilize vegetable fields. There were also shops in cavernous Ani. They weren't different in essence from the homes. The same room could be used as a store and living quarters. Family tombs were also here. The Grand Onents from one of the rich families of the city had a splendid family mausoleum in cavernous Ani. In the tombs in the caves, those buried were basically from rich and well-known families. This is one of the tombs of cavernous Ani. Another district of the city was underground Ani. It was in all likelihood created after the formation of Ani as a capital city in the 10th, 11th centuries. Underground Ani cannot be considered a district for one very plain reason, simply that it was one passageway which stretched out longitudinally along the old city. Underground Ani had no permanent residents due to humidity, lack of air, and lack of light. It had military defensive meaning and for just that reason was found on the supervision of the official organs of the city. According to legend, underground Ani connected the Bagratouni's capital city with Kars and other Armenian cities. Another legend tells that the souls of the city's patriots and patriotic people lived in underground Ani and until the end didn't abandon their capital city. Since the capital city of Ani was surrounded on three sides by canyons and gorges, it became necessary to construct large and small bridges which were to connect it to places near and far. From Ani's interior bridges, nothing has been preserved, nor ruins, nor their traces. Researchers testify that 5 large stone bridges were built crossing the Harutyunyan, 2 of which were on the territory of Ani. Those were probably constructed before the 9th century. Those bridges were made of stone, were single-arched, and had a spread of 30 meters. In Ani itself, there was one large bridge called Inner Gerarpi. These are the remnants of just that bridge. 1 foot of the bridge is in eastern Armenia, the other western Armenia. Today, these are only small bits of our hub, connecting each other and waiting to unite the 2 longing shores of historic Armenia. The wooden roadways that form the link from the abutments on the banks to both ends of the bridge's span were movable. In times of danger, they would be withdrawn to the bank, leaving the span standing free of them, thus making the bridge impassable. From a defensive point of view, also important were the piers on the bridge's towers, which on the inside had the guardhouse and customs house. The towers had covered connecting arches and arch-shaped doors, which they closed during times of danger, making the bridge impassable. In Ani, everything was thought out to the last detail. The city's owners weren't only making it prosperous, but were using their common sense and creativity to create a strong defensive system. Ani progressed thanks to its many trades. Ani's weapon makers, welders, jewelers, and silversmiths enjoyed great fame. Here they prepared and mounted the most colorful scrolls. The city was also known for its textile makers, hat makers, dyers, ceramic workers, and leather workers. In Ani, the crafts were passed from son to son. Also, even the legal relationship between master and pupil was regulated. The master had to transfer his knowledge to his pupil, and in return he wasn't to expect pay. But after the pupil received his qualifications, it was mandatory that he give his master special presents. From the Middle Ages, teacher and proverb writer Mkhitar Ghost's well-known work Dadastanagirk, Code of Law, we find out that the craftsmen of Ani had two methods of being paid. They could be paid with money or part of his client's raw materials. In the life of Ani of the Middle Ages, the trader was on equal standing with the craftsman. Both domestic and foreign or transit trade played an important part in the city's economic life. In Ani, these were organized according to the orders of the Bagratouni kings, which set limits on amounts, weights, and units used. Certain supervisors controlled the markets, preventing deceit and fraud in money matters. Ani's market wasn't only a trade center, but a center of social life. Basically, the city's shops and stores were located here. Caravans from far off India or China would come here, residents from nearby villages would come here on carts, and as many business deals were sealed in the gorge, that many Eastern languages were heard. In the era of the Bagratounis, favorable conditions were created for domestic and transit trade in Armenia. As a result of the centuries of struggles against the Byzantines and Arabs, trade across Assyria and Asia Minor was interrupted. And with that situation, the importance of the Armenia of the Bagratounis in international trade increased. Ani became the only secure bridge between East and West. Byzantium, Persia, the Arab countries, southern Russia, and Central Asia were all in Ani's trade route. Porcelain items and silk were imported from China. Porcelain items from Persia and Mesopotamia, and illustrated glass containers and paint from Cilicia and Egypt. Of the goods exported from Armenia, the largest percentage was made up of textile products, pottery, and items made of silver. Armenian carpets, ornaments made of silver and gold, and different types of weapons were of no less quality than what was produced by the best masters from around the world. For the arriving traders and their products, every kind of comfort and condition was created in the city. Many guest houses, inns, and stone homes with all conveniences were built. There were between 10 and 15 hotels in Ani. Tigran had 4 guest houses. Of those, the largest was located near the Church of the Apostles. This guest house had 2 large halls, one of which was called Hotel of the Sphinx, the other being called Hotel of the Snakes or Lions. These names were given according to the reliefs on their walls. The monetary currency used in the Armenia of the Bagratounis and its capital city of Ani wasn't mentioned at all by historians. From this, we conclude that the Bagratounis of Ani didn't print their own money. Byzantine and Arabic currency was in circulation. And since the unification of currency was of benefit to international trade and the Bagratounis had great benefit from that trade, they forgot the idea of printing their own money. Yet, during the excavations, silver coins from the time of Tigran the Great were found in Ani. During its blossoming, 100,000 inhabitants lived and created in Ani. The naturally strong position of Ani and its defensive construction led to the obvious advantage of the close gathering of the population. The fast growth of the population was also connected with Ani becoming a capital city. It wasn't only the Bagratounis who established themselves here, but large numbers of noblemen and clergymen. But the masses of Ani were basically artisans. Ani captivated everyone, the nobleman and the common man. In the 11th century, alongside the old, upper class of feudal Ani, a new stratum of wealthy people with authority came into being, which Aristarchus Lestiverti named as the heads of the city. The historian who laid the blame of Ani's destruction on the shoulders of the noblemen wrote that they got rich on the sweat of the poor, usury and illegal laities, and were merciless when dealing with the poor. They preferred an easy life, and they didn't avoid deceit. Possibly the wound caused by the reason of Ani's destruction was so deep that the historian exaggerated the real facts. Ani's governing system was quite similar to the governing methods of today's cities. The city was governed by a committee of elected officials which also implemented legislative rule, and the city mayor was the head official and was called Emir of Emirs or head Emir. Along with that, whichever social class they belonged to, the people of Ani loved their city and were proud to be from Ani. From the caves to the palace citadel, they gave love to Ani, adding another stone to the city's foundation, so they would see it more splendid and beautiful. Ani saw great progress in the time of King Gagik I. These were peaceful years. In this era, along with a great number of civil and public buildings, the Mother Cathedral, the Church of Gagik, and Abu Hamran's church were constructed. Tradition tells that at the end of the first millennium, in 999 AD, the capital city of Ani was in great anguish. News was being circulated that the world was coming to an end at the end of the millennium. The people of Ani didn't want to start any constructions or get married. In just this confusion, King Gagik and his wife Queen Khachatryan and the royal architect Turdat decided to spread word in the city that God appeared to King Gagik and said that the world of Armenia was not going to collapse, and the whole nation should be busy creating, building, planting trees and greenery, and making the country prosper. And Ani began to prosper. The architect Turdat built one wonder after the other. Foreigners who saw Ani told that there were more wonders in the Armenian capital city than in all the cities of Europe combined. Busy with making Ani prosper, the city's inhabitants forgot about the world being destroyed, continuing to live and make Ani prosper. In literary sources, Ani is remembered as the city of 1001 churches. No one has tried to count the exact number of churches, but together with its secular character, Ani was a city of faith. This is irrefutable. In Ani, everybody was capable of building churches, and they did so. Even the simple shepherd, whose wife wasn't allowed to enter a church on the Easter holiday, built a church for his family and called it Church of the Shepherd, or as the people say, Herdsman's Church. Every person of Ani entered this world with faith in his heart. The people of Ani first built a house, then a church, and after that had children. In just that way, Ani had many children and churches. Children who believed in their church, and the church which assisted its children. The Mother Cathedral was the symbol of Ani, the mother city's Mother Cathedral. The church, which was dedicated to Mary, Mother of God, was located in the center of the city and could be seen from all districts. Its construction was begun in the days of Sambat II, in the year 989. But the church's construction was brought to completion by King Gagik and Queen Khachatryan. The architect of the church, renowned Turdat, the master who was asked to renovate the dome of St. Sophia of Constantinople, but didn't fall victim to the Byzantine Caesar's profiteering offer and wasn't blinded by the many gifts offered by the Byzantine royalty. He returned to Ani and continued the construction of the Mother Cathedral so he could complete the construction of the church. The inscription of Queen Khachatryan is inscribed on the southern wall. The inscription testifies to the builder's unlimited faith and dedication. The mother cathedral was only smaller in size than the royal palace. Here Catholicos and Bagratouni kings were ordained, and here the most splendid and vastly attended religious ceremonies and masses were held. The man-sized silver cross, which was attached to the side of the dome, gave special splendor to the cathedral. Sambat II had brought a huge crystal chandelier from India, especially for Mother Cathedral. The chandelier had a capacity of 12 liters of oil. The cathedral was ornamented with unique splendor, fitting the Bagratouni kings. For centuries on end, the cathedral endured the ravages of nature and man, reaching us with the collapsed dome. The guilt of the dome's collapse rests on the shoulders of an earthquake, but the church chandelier, gold-covered religious fittings, and accessories were stolen and destroyed during the course of Seljuk invasions. The Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan converted the Mother Cathedral into a mosque, and in the place of the cross placed the half-moon in the dome. But in the 12th century, the cathedral again became Christian, and until today, in spite of its many wounds, is standing and amazes with its size and power. That spiritual strength which the half-collapsed Mother Cathedral has isn't possessed by the other, many erect monuments. Bagratouni's steadfast spirit and Turdat's exceptional skill, this is the secret of the cathedral's might. Now the priest of the Mother Cathedral of Ani is the dove, which will sing and warble until the time that Ani's real owners come and send their prayers to God. Even this dove knows that the sounds of the Armenian verge, Lord have mercy, can cure the Mother Cathedral of Ani's wounds and soothe the insults. Even the dove's warbling is sonorous in this cathedral. It is possible only to picture what kind of strength and effect the sounds of the higher matter, Lord's Prayer, had under these walls. In the Ani of many churches, the second most renowned was the Church of Gagik, which bore the name of Saint Gregory. In Ani, there was a tradition to name the churches according to their builders. For just that reason, the church built by Gagik I is more commonly remembered by the name Church of Gagik. Gagik Bagratouni wanted to have a church in his capital city with the characteristics of Zvartnots. But he didn't order the architect Turdat to construct a replica of Zvartnots, but something more perfect. Compared with Zvartnots, it was more soaring and the columns more elegant. The Bagratouni king wanted this cathedral to emphasize his greatness and grandeur. During the excavation of the cathedral, Gagik I's statue was discovered, with a model of the church in its hands. But the church, as specialists note, had structural and layout faults. These are also the fact that it was built on a layer of unstable ground located on an area rich with natural caves, contributed to its receiving cracks from an earthquake 3 to 4 years after it was constructed, and collapsing to its foundation 10 to 12 years later. Next to the Church of Gagik are the ruins of the Holy Apostles' Church. It was probably a seat of bishops. From wall inscriptions, it is evident that the church was constructed by the Pavlavunis, the family bishops of Ani belonged to. They were a well-known princely family and gave such sons to the Armenian nation as chronologist and teacher Grigor Magistros Pahlavi, the famous writer of the Middle Ages Nerses Shnorhali, the Graceful, and his brother Grigor Pahlavi. One by one, they assumed the Armenian Catholical throne. The Holy Apostolic Church was a meeting place not only for discussing church matters, but also for administrative and civil issues. Attached to the main forecourt to the south was a small church, which was probably built in the 7th to the 8th centuries. Under the sponsorship of the Pahlavi family, 2 other churches were built in Ani, Saint Gregory of Abu Ghamrens and the comparatively small church for Ani, but no less famous as a monument, the Holy Saviour Church, which is sometimes called by its builder's name, Abul-Gharib Pahlavi Church. Concerning the construction of churches in Ani, one who possessed great love and was from one of the wealthy families of Ani stands out. This was Tigran Onens. He didn't have noble roots, with his assets accumulating from renting land, usury, and trade. In the days of the Zacharyans, he was tax superintendent. Certain districts of the city, as well as villages, estates, shops, oil presses, and mills belonged to him. A family with this kind of riches couldn't be without a church. He loved to build churches and sponsored the work in renovating this or that structure. He was responsible for the rebuilding of the steps of the Mother Cathedral and constructed the St. Gregory Church, which is also known as the Tigran Onens Church. Thanks to the many inscriptions on the walls of the drum, it is called by the name of Nakhshil. Even standing wounded and naked like this, against the snow, rain, and wind, the church is beautiful. It is naked without the altar, the priest, and the walls, which have forgotten the fragrance of incense. The walls, with their colorful paintings, give color to their everyday, so as not to fall to ruin and to give me strength to live. And when it is dark in your soul and you want light, you need to go down the side of the Harutyunyan gorge and reach an ardent light resting on the edge of the gorge. The monastery of virgins, pure like a virgin and radiant as light. This also was built by Tigran Onens at the beginning of the 13th century. The delicate columns, soaring arches, and expertly built dome testified that the architect conquered the struggle against darkness and in the darkness of this gorge created light. Light which even in this half-ruined condition blinds your eyes, to then illuminates your soul. The monastery's church has several traces of reconstruction on the walls. These disappeared in the 19th century. The church was finally abandoned in the 19th century. Also in Akçakober, in different times, several churches were constructed. Near the church, the Prince Zakhare, constructed in the 13th century, there was also an older church. Its construction is attributed to Grigore the Illuminator, who, according to that same legend, destroyed Akçakober's pagan temple and in its place built a church. In the future, the church was called Grigore the Illuminator. It is quite clear that churches weren't constructed in Ani with some thoughtless desire to amaze or to guarantee there were a certain number of churches. The architect who was building the church put his whole imagination into the work. One gang of marauders could easily destroy a church. But how could they destroy 1,001 churches? They have been destroying for centuries, but the end isn't in sight. They destroy, and in their mind, they curse the creating and building Armenian. The dome of Ani's 1,001 cathedrals is the sky, and these iron supports are the columns reminding of the cripple's wooden cane, and these illuminations are the classless visitors' recordings. No son of Armenia likes to tell this part of Ani's history. He would give anything to erase the years of rule by this nomadic wind, that these pages of Ani's history wouldn't exist, and that I would tell about Ani's blossoming and glory without telling about destruction and ruin. But after the death of Gagik I, the Bagratouni state weakened due to inner dissension. The struggle especially intensified between Gagik I's sons, King Hovannes Sembad and his brother Ashot IV. They both wanted to take possession of the throne. According to the rules of succession, the heir to the crown was Hovannes, but the younger Ashot also had pretensions of wearing the crown. Their argument was somehow smoothed over by the intervention of princes. But Hovannes Sembad, fearing invasion by the Byzantine army, which had just subdued the rebellion of Hayk, willed Ani and its invariants to the Byzantines. After the deaths of Hovannes Sembad and Ashot, Catholicos Petros I Getadarts and the traitorous Prince Vest Sarkis agreed amongst themselves to make complete the false with that surrendered Ani. But they met the resistance of part of the noblemen and the city's inhabitants. With the purpose of preserving the state power, the resistance of Vahan Pavlavuni, they ordained the young Gagik Ashot's son as king in the end of the year 1042. The Byzantine army besieged Ani several times, demanding the surrender of the city. Led by the army's commander Vahan Pavlavuni, the city's defense was begun. Ani remained inaccessible, pushing back the enemy's attacks. The Byzantines weren't successful in capturing Ani with the power of weapons, but by cunning and efforts of the traitorous Sarkis. With the pretext of having negotiations, the Byzantine Caesar Constantine Monomach cunningly invited Gagik II to Constantinople. Gagik was well acquainted with Byzantine cunning, but the traitorous princes put his vigilance to sleep. After a royal reception, Monomach showed his real intentions, taking the king of Ani into custody and demanding he surrender his capital city. In this condition, Gagik II struggled for his Ani's freedom for 30 days. To intermediate in freeing the Armenian king, Grigor Magistros came to Constantinople. He was worried about saving his holdings, not the fate of Gagik or Ani. He saw the only way of solving this problem as the surrendering of Ani to the Byzantines and in return being established in Mesopotamia. In this way, the Byzantine Caesar found in his hands the fake will and the 40 keys of Ani. In place of the capital city, Gagik II received the city of Pisu and its surroundings and lived there as an exile without his throne and without Ani. And in Ani, people were still uninformed about the Byzantine cunning. Soon the tragedy was revealed. Ani remained without Ani and without his king. The dedicated people of Ani preferred to be ruled by any of their neighbors over domination of Byzantium. But in the end, they considered just this Byzantine rule as an acceptable way out, because there was always the danger of invasions by nomadic Turkish tribes. Byzantium reached its goal. In 1045, the kingdom of the Bagratounis and Ani fell under Byzantine domain. The kingdom of the Bagratounis, which had lasted 160 years, disappeared from the arena of history, and Ani ceased being the capital city of an independent kingdom. The pain of this loss grows from the fact that Ani wasn't captured because of war, but deceit, cunning, and betrayal. But King Gagik didn't stop the struggle. Until the year 1080, he still had hope that Ani would be returned to its real owners, the Bagratounis. Gagik tried to come to agreement with the Shaddadians. To reach his goal, he didn't even avoid the idea of becoming friends with the enemy. Gagik and the Shaddadians agreed to have Gagik's grandson, Hovannes Bagratouni, marry an heiress of the Kurdish tribe. But they poisoned Hovannes Bagratouni the day before the wedding, and with the Gagik's hopes of returning Ani evaporated. And even though the vein of Ani's Armenian kings was cut, it continued in Cilicia, which became the new homeland of Armenian kings. After the fall of the kingdom of Ani, along with the capital city of Shirak, it was ruled by Byzantine governors. The emigration of Ani's population started in the time of Byzantine domination. The people of Ani were fleeing from the Byzantines' religious persecution, the clergy's intrigues, heavy taxes, and the many invasions by the Seljuks. In the Byzantine era, almost no construction was done in Ani. During the course of 20 years of rule, the Byzantines left no architectural trace in Ani. In 1064, during the time of the Seljuk invasion of Armenia, Ani was besieged for 25 days and captured, the Seljuks suffering many losses. But the emir of Dwin, Abu Swar, bought Ani from the Seljuk Sultan Alp Arslan. Abu Swar was King Ashot IV Bagratouni's son-in-law. Abu Swar belonged to the Kurdish tribe of Shaddadian, and since he had a family connection with the Bagratounis, he wanted to become ruler of the territories formerly owned by the Bagratouni kingdom. Purchasing Ani, he gave it to his son Manuche. This laid the foundation of the Shaddadian rule in Ani, and my Ani, free from the treacherous Byzantine aggressor, was forced to bear the Seljuk and Shaddadian chains for 135 years. In this era, my city lost its glitter and glory, remaining in a ruined state. A series of reforms were done in Ani only during Manuche's rule. Even though Manuche only did this with the purpose of enriching his treasury, in any event some construction work was completed in the city. In Manuche's time, a certain structure was converted into a mosque, which in the past had been one of the architectural civic monuments of Ani. This is found not far from the Mother Cathedral, near the wall of Ashot. It was converted into a mosque during the time of Emir Manuche, and after that was called by his name. Its first 2 floors were constructed in the time of the Bagratounis. This served as a customs house and a guardhouse, and was also but already in the 70s of the 11th century, they turned into a mosque, constructing the 3rd floor and the minaret. During the excavations, both Armenian and Arabic inscriptions were discovered. Is it by accident that the mosque was built near the Mother Cathedral? Isn't it obvious? Only the builders know that. But the fact that the mosque was built in the neighborhood of the Mother Cathedral is speaking proof that it is an unsuccessful attempt at replicating Turtat's creation. But the sign attached in front of the mosque clearly states that this is the first mosque constructed on the territory of Western Armenia, which is now called Eastern Anatolia, only in the 11th century. Comparatively speaking, the Manuche Mosque is one of the better preserved monuments of Ani. It turns out that in Turkey they already aren't against the true statement that this land is Armenian, and they are newcomers who became owners of the land of kings. The Shaddadians built a second mosque in Ani, the Abul Mamran Mosque, which is not standing. It is clear from this huge pile of stones that it was also a large structure in size. A Seljuk palace was also constructed in this era, as well as this section, which was known as the Seljuk district. Without thinking, you compare and become proud that the building skills of your people are exceptional. The soaring, delicate Armenian cathedrals, civic buildings, homes, and even the cave dwellings all grasping the earth here. It is a strange accident that the Seljuk Palace is also one of the better preserved monuments in Ani. Several times in the 12th century, Ani passed from hand to hand. The Georgian army captured Ani with the help of namely those people of Ani. The only Georgian church in Ani was probably built in those times. Yet there is also the opinion that this is an Armenian Chalcedonian church, turned into a Georgian church during the time of their rule. Neither chronologists nor wall inscriptions tell about its construction. Only one wall of the church remains standing. In the sphere of the development of Armenian Khachkars, cross-stones, the capital city of Ani had a considerable contribution. In the 12th century, in Ani, several monument Khachkars were built. One is called the Monument of Hovannes, which is dedicated not to Hovannes, but to his parents. One of the other two is called Barsech Catholicos, and the other by the name of Mkhitar. These shared the same cruel fate of the other structures. These are also crumbled, the body of the cross walls suffering several incurable wounds. In 1199, Ani was liberated and passed to the Zakharians. Ani became an administrative center. The years of Zakaryan rule were short, only 4 decades, but they were able to cure Ani's wounds, brought about by the Seljuks and Shaddadians. Ani again became a well-ordered, heavily populated city, a great center of trade and workmanship. Secular buildings were constructed in the city and bridges and castle walls were reconstructed. The Zakaryans reconstructed churches built in the past and built new ones with a new style. Magnificent wall paintings, internal fittings, and painted decorations in contemporary style. In the days of the Zakaryans, parallel to building churches, the construction of wall ramparts and pyramids brought honor and were a great manifestation of benevolence. Even though Ani didn't have the same glitter in the days of the Zakaryans as it did in the days of the Bagratounis, the city experienced a great blossoming. The Zakaryans were Armenian Christians who loved their country and who ruled not to destroy but to build. The blossoming period of the Zakaryans was interrupted by a Mongol invasion. This very beautiful capital city found itself in the center of attention of invaders. All of the nomadic tribes of the region, like starved wolves, swirled around Ani and at the most opportune moment attacked the city. In 1236, the Mongols besieged and captured Ani. The Mongol aggressors first sent a delegation and offered the people of Ani to surrender the city without resisting, but they met the people's fury. The offer made the owners of the city indignant, and even though it was against all written and unwritten rules to kill members of a delegation, the people of Ani killed the Mongol delegation to show their level of indignation. Until the middle of the 14th century, Ani, as a city, continued to defend its existence. The politics of the Mongols and later Turkish tribes depriving the inhabitants of their rights, and high taxes forced large groups to emigrate to foreign countries such as Russia, Poland, and Georgia, while later the people of Ani who had emigrated to the banks of the Don River and the generations that followed, founded the city of New Nakhichevan. Tradition ties the final collapse of Ani to the earthquake of 1319. However, destruction caused by people was more ruinous than that caused by nature. In the 16th century, Ani was already a small village. As it appears, a great blow was dealt to Ani by the invasions of Tamerlane. In the 18th century, Ani was already a pile of ruins and belonged to Turkish Bags. After the Russian-Turkish War of 1877 to 1888, Ani passed to Russia. This situation awakened Armenian hope that it was still possible to save Ani. Everywhere they talked about raising money. In the last decade of the 19th century, Nicolas Marsh started excavations in Ani. With the huge amount of objects excavated, a rich museum comprised of 2 sections was opened in Ani. Later, the museum's many objects were moved to St. Petersburg, the Museum of Cars, and the Church of the Apostles in Mush. Due to World War I starting, excavations in Ani stopped, the ensuing confusion leading to the loss of the rich excavated material and its spread from museum to museum. For a time, in the beginning of the century, in 1918, Ani was part of the First Armenian Republic. but Ani was able to give color to Armenia for a very short time. Then in this train car, the Armenian question and also Ani's fate were decided, and Armenia remained without Ani. Ani was forcibly given to Turkey without the participation of its Armenian owners. This is the Kars Museum, which is now the home of a few of Ani's treasures. But there isn't even one word saying they are Armenian. It's as if all the many signs spread out in Ani have a peculiar fear of the Armenian word. Nothing is mentioned about the Bagratounis, Zakharyans, and Kamsarakans being noble families. They even tried to change the Bagratouni name to Bagratli. Also in different cities of Western Armenia, the Armenian word doesn't appear anywhere next to the monuments and structures. That is prohibited in Turkey in written and unwritten laws, just as it was prohibited in the Turkey of the Sultans to pronounce an Armenian word. On the only road leading to Ani, the visitor is greeted by this mockery monument placed there by the Turkish government. It is dedicated to the supposed martyrs of Armenian atrocities. When was it that the people subjected to genocide had the opportunity to put a Turkish village to the sword? And why is it that the day of the massacre is designated as April 24? Why that date, which is the date that is a call to Armenians spread around the world to remember the victims of the Armenian genocide? Falsifying history and inventing facts has become the main pastime of Turkish historians. And until we prove this or that fact is falsified, they diligently invent and invent. Your anger will double if you take a look and see the current Armenian state is at your side. That Ani is this close. It is only a distance of 30 kilometers from Gyumri and the Ani station, some 7 to 7 kilometers. This is the Armenian-Turkish border and the Turkish gate, locked for Armenia. In 1995, Turkey closed its border with Armenia, announcing that it wouldn't open it until the Karabakh question was solved. And the Armenian forces leave supposedly occupied Azeri territories. They close the road leading to Ani, but there is no way they can close the road of longing and fate. To reach our longed-for Ani, we need to pass 450 kilometers, 2 countries, 2 borders, and an insincere welcome and farewell. But even this doesn't stop us, since the Ani is mine prayer is on our lips. The desire to see it lives in our veins, and we bear her name. Even the long journey doesn't stop the Armenian who longs for Ani. That road is the road that reveals our identity. We pass it and we find out who we are, where we have been, and where we are going. We go around Ararat and find ourselves in every corner of our historical homeland. We go so we never forget, as this is the road of our longing. This is the land of our longing. Let's long a little more, to reach ourselves, to find ourselves, and for all of us to say, Ani is mine. In her present, Ani doesn't need an owner. Until recently, during Turkish military exercises, the mother cathedral was used as a target, and the stones as building material. Now Ani is betrayed to inattention and indifference. Slowly the explosions and rattling in nearby mines are being extinguished. Every day there is one stone less in the city walls. Currently Ani is wounded, crippled, without a tender-hearted, curing hand. Ani is inside the border of a country whose people know nothing about it, a country whose history school books don't even have 2 words about the history of Ani, a country where the knowledge of its guides about Ani is limited to 2 fables, a country for whom Ani is a ghost town, a city ruin, where animals and vagrants spend the night, and finally, a country where faithful Muslims try and desert themselves by doing their Friday namaz in the Christian Armenian Mother Cathedral. Our silent quarrel with the wind will go on. The Armenian cannot reconcile with his present. It is not fitting to Ani to have these kinds of owners. This is a city of kings. I remembered Ani's glorious Armenian past and turned my glance towards the current Turkish ruination. And here, the church built by Onans, from where the scratched and dug-out eyes in the wall paintings look out. The church is silently sobbing, with its iron pulsing its heart and this tin-plated piece fastened to the dome. Blood is dripping from the wall paintings instead of the special paint Vortan Karmir. This is the customs house, which in no way can reconcile with being forcibly turned into a mosque, and with its arches, with decorated columns and Armenian inscriptions, it calls out endlessly to every visitor, saying, "I'm not a mosque." Here is the monastery of the Virgins, which every day gives a rock and a ray of light from its walls to the Harutyunyan, and will soon toss itself entirely into the lap of the river. And this is an Armenian Tonir, which longs so much for the fragrance of Armenian lavash, that it asks every Armenian coming to Ani for a bundle of wood, flour, and the lavash baking hands of an Armenian woman. And here is the royal palace, which longs for its royal owners and the power of the Bagratounis. And here is the peak of the citadel, which looks for the Armenian to plant flowers in its garden. And this is the Silk Road, which hasn't heard the ringing sound of Armenian caravans for ages. And this is the Mother Cathedral, whose pain and grief isn't from the open cracks of doomless roof of its present. It can't swallow the insult of hearing the sound of the namaz inside its walls, and in the place of the cross, the attached half-moon. What does my Ani have now? How can it live and give you and me life? When it's this helpless? The answer is obvious. The secret of Ani's longevity is its having Armenian roots. The eternal capital city of Armenia will live on, since it has one vein, which gives it love and life from the shores of eastern Armenia. The Ani is mine prayer murmuring from the lips of millions of Armenians. A sky which dedicates every sunrise and sunset to Ani's glory. Armenian sons who rush to see Ani, so they will live. Many creating Armenian hands, which are waiting until they can rebuild Ani. And Armenian women, whose name is Ani.